Welcome back, gang. It's Delt here from Deltiasgaming.com, and it's 2025 and Baldur's Gate 3 is still alive and kicking. Patch 8 will be released this year at some point, getting 12 new subclasses to this already gargantuan, huge, detailed game. So what I want to do is give you an updated, complete beginner guide. Whether you're new to the game, returning, and you want some very simple priorities, mechanics explained to you, this is going to be the video for you. It's going to be long, detailed, beginner friendly with timestamps below if you wish to skip ahead. If you get something out of this, hit that thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more BG3 content. Okay, so first thing up is an overview of the game and what you're going to expect in this game. This Baldur's Gate 3 is not Skyrim. It's broken down into 3 individual acts. There's going to be a prologue, 3 acts, and then an epilogue with companion story conclusion. The catch here is once you've reached a certain point and you're progressing to the next act, you will not be able to go back. The game will warn you. So there's a various checklist that I have, Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3 on my website, Deltiasgaming.com, that goes, hey, make sure you get these important things before you progress to the final fight or beyond in the various acts. I'll link those in the description if you like that. So Act 1 is basically the foundation of the entire game. It introduces you to companions, the story, a bunch of valuable gear, puzzles, and it's like really, really massive. The biggest thing here is that a lot of your decisions in Act 1 will carry over into Act 2 and really come to a conclusion in Act 3. So your priority is just to get more familiar with the game, not die a bunch, unlock all the companions, and then make some critical story choices that will appear throughout the entirety of the game. Now, Act 2 is a bit darker. I personally can't stand this. It's thematically and visually dark, just like any 3-act in a story. This is going to be the low point of your hero's arc. It's going to feel doom and gloom, not be nearly as big in size and scope, but have some dramatic, important decisions at the end of Act 2 and the conclusion. Now, Act 3 is going to be massive, the grand finale. So all those important decisions, all those characters finally come to a head, finishing off one of the best stories in gaming history, in my opinion. You could honestly spend hundreds of hours both in Act 1 and Act 3. They almost feel like separate games entirely. You're going to have a huge, massive, sprawling city, and all these old characters will come to fruition of what you made a decision on. Remember, there is no New Game Plus. You're going to get an epilogue with companion story conclusion, which is a nice touch, but you're not going to be able just to do everything over again with all of your gear. So there is an honor mode difficulty with permanent death and 1 save. That's meant for the hardcore sweaty players that really want to push themselves, and I absolutely love it. So that's what you can expect. You're going to go through these acts. There's not going to be a New Game Plus, and it's going to be rewarding with a lot of cool decision points that you made coming to a final head in the climactic finish to one of the best games ever. Now, let's jump into Character Creator and explain all the little details in this because people get really tripped up in the Character Creator. So first thing you're going to do is you're going to hit New Game, and there's going to be a bunch of different difficulties. If it's your first time, you have no D&D experience, and you just want to experience the story, obviously Explorer is for you. Balanced is good if you have played like Divinity Original Sin 2 or you know some D&D mechanics. Tactician is a little less than Honor Mode. It's very challenging if you're not familiar with the game. And then Honor Mode is 1 save, 1 death. Your campaign's over on Honor Mode. You get a cool achievement. But if you do screw up and die, you can continue on Tactician. Custom allows you to basically customize all the various variables in your difficulty. So if you want something really challenging but don't like one aspect of Honor Mode or Tactician, you can adjust it here. So for beginners, Balance is a really good choice, or Explorer if you don't want a whole lot of challenge. Okay, you're going to come to a bunch of important decisions on Character Creator. Just know that most of this you can change. What you cannot change is your race or the type of character that you are at the start. So those are the 2 most important things. There is respec in the game. So you have custom character, which is, this is like your own individual story, and then you have these origin characters. So you can actually play as the companion, and the game will unfold differently based on their background and story. So if you want a clean slate, and typically this is what I recommend everyone play as the Tav first, this is what you go with. Now, you're going to notice these companions, and you have this unique one, Dark Urge. This is awesome, but it's super dark and twisted. I highly would recommend playing this, but not your first playthrough. If you do, it will be a very different experience, and a lot of new dialogue, cutscenes, and even some new quests. So if you get through the game and you just loved it, consider coming back here and playing the dark side. It's really fun. Now let's go over races. So this is going to be a bit different than a lot of games that you've encountered. Baldur's Gate 3 uses a modified Dungeons & Dragon 5e rule set. So in Dungeons & Dragon 5e, from what I'm familiar with, different races get different bonuses to their ability score. So you see their ability score in this top right here. This is what determines a lot of your dice rolls. So the game's going to basically make these dice rolls passively for you, and it determines combat, speech, all sorts of different things, including survivability and dying. So obviously the more stats you get, the better. What Baldur's Gate 3 does is give every race a +1 and a +2 bonus. That means that unlike D&D, it's a lot more forgiving on which race you pick and why. My favorite race overall, what I recommend for folks that don't know what to pick, is Wood Half-Elf, and this is different than the Elf. The reason why is you get shield proficiency, which I'll explain a little bit later, and light armor. That is very useful. And then also something unique, your movement speed is increased by 1.5 meters. The reason this is important is it happens every single turn and every single build can take advantage of it. Now they look somewhat humanoid, which is nice if you want that look. This is a good race to pick if you just don't know what to do and you're confused. Dragonborn looks cool, but a lot of their passives are pretty weak. So they have a base thing, they have this acid spray, and they have dragon ancestry. Not that strong. They look amazing. My favorite race to play personally is the Githyanki. It is one of the most interesting races with tons of dialogue that you would never experience otherwise, and super powerful bonuses. Tiefling's good, Elf is good, Human is trash, sorry humans, and then Half-Orc is probably the best for melee damage dealers. So that's usually what I pick, is either Half-Orc or a Githyanki. Now, let's go talk about classes. Just a brief review on all of these classes. The Barbarian is kind of like your meathead melee powerhouse. They're going to use not necessarily armor, they can use clothing and just martial weapons. So they can use pretty much all the weapons. They do not want to use heavy armor. They want to be in clothing or light or medium, using two-handed weapons, generally playing in melee and just blasting things. They have a unique mechanic called Rage. So once you rage, it gives you extra damage with melee, and you can throw weapons. You can actually make a throw build that's very powerful. So it's a simple, powerful melee class with tons of HP. Bard is kind of a different one. It is a hybrid spellcaster, but you can play melee and you can play at a distance. They are pretty interesting. They start out dreadfully slow, but if you want a mix of spellcasting, specifically support and healing, Bard is a good choice. It also has hand crossbow proficiency, so you can play with dual crossbows, a very unique playstyle, but actually be quite effective at range distance. The Cleric is the best support class in the game. So they are typically your healer, but a few different subclasses can actually do really good damage, specifically the Light Domain, the Tempest Domain, and even War can be like a melee damage dealer. So if you want something just for healing and support, this is what I usually spec Shadowheart to. Life Domain is for you. Druid is very unique in that it has some spellcasting, it has some melee, but it wants to use Wild Shape. It wants to turn into a bear or another type of animal and use that. When you do that, you get a whole new health bar and a whole new set of abilities. So it's extremely tanky and survivable at the beginning or even at end game. Fighter, in my opinion, is the best overall for beginners because there's almost nothing complex with it. You can equip all light, medium, heavy armor, shields, and weapons. So you don't need to know all this detail about proficiency to be really powerful. Monk is very different. You're going to use your basically unarmed attacks and gloves for damage. It seems weird and goofy, but as you level up and progress, you're going to get multiple actions and bonus actions and absolutely blast people in melee range, just not with fancy weapons. Paladin is what I consider overall the best in the entire game as far as classes go, because you have spellcasting, you use charisma as one of your ability scores, so you're good with talking and persuading, and you can do a lot of martial weapon damage along with equipping almost anything in the game. It is extremely complex though, and you're going to have tons of skills on your bar and abilities, but you actually don't even need to use them. Ranger is my favorite for the highest difficulty. It's very similar to a rogue, but more combat proficient. When you multi-class them, a bit more complex. It gets extremely powerful when you can play at range with a longbow, absolutely nuking everything at a distance. Rogue, this is what Asterion is, and you almost always need one at the beginning of the game to unlock chests and look for traps and so on. They're similar to the Ranger, but just weaker in combat performance because their power fades beyond about level 4. Sorcerers are my favorite damage-dealing spellcasters. They can unload a lot of damage with their meta magic, allowing them to use a couple of spells in a turn where other classes just can't do that. However, their spells are limited. So think super powerful, but it's limited spells. Warlock's kind of in between. So you have some light armor proficiency, you can use some weapons. You don't have a huge spell book, but you can get your spells back a lot easier with a short rest where everyone else has to do a long rest. And it's the least complex. You can just cast Hex, which is a spell, and then a cantrip, Eldritch Blast, right here, and do very, very good damage at range without this super complex loadout. So if you like spellcasting, want to kind of use a weapon as well, and don't want something complex, this is for you. Wizard has the biggest spell book. So you're going to be able to pick like tons of different spells. The issue is, unlike the Sorcerer, you can only use one per turn in general. So while you have a huge, wide spell book and you can learn spells just from scrolls, you're just going to be limited in what you can use. Very, very good for utility. Now, also something to be aware of these proficiencies. So this is what I got hung up with on the game the very first time. When you go to equip a weapon or an armor piece, you need to see if your class and or character has proficiencies. No, meaning they know how to use it. So like the fighter has all sorts of different proficiencies. They can use light, medium, heavy, simple weapons, martial weapons. When you look at the individual weapon, it'll tell you if it's simple or martial, or if it's light, medium, or heavy, and so forth. It's kind of common sense. Most spellcasters are going to be using clothing and not armor. But just keep in mind, your class will determine this. You can get different proficiencies in armor and or weapons via feats while you're leveling or by multi-classing. If that wasn't confusing enough, let's head over to the ability score. So the first thing about ability score, you can mouse over and it kind of tells you what it does. Strength, obviously you want to use it as a melee damage dealer. Dexterity is like a range damage dealer or rogue. Constitution's your health. Intelligence is typically just for wizards. Wisdom is for like clerics and druids. And charisma is for paladins, bards, sorcerers, and warlocks. It also helps with speech checks, was very helpful. So one thing to know is you're only going to get a bonus when it's on the actual even number. So if I drop it down to 16, you can see I still have a +3. If I drop it down to 15, I have a +2. So typically you want to land on an even number in character creation unless you're very familiar with the game and are going to do permanent bonuses, which will give you a +1 permanently, a bit more complex. So just for keeping it simple, stupid, land on an even number. So what these correspond to is you come down here to change. These are skill proficiencies. I've already said proficiencies if you're not confused enough. But it will tell you what it does. Think of these as almost exclusively outside of combat. The two that I think are the strongest are Perception. This is a wisdom-based one, usually what I have Shadowheart do, and then Insight. When you're exploring dialogue or questing, you're going to get these checks, which are dice rolls that are determined based on these individual scores. As you have a party of 4, each person in the party will be able to make this dice roll check. So typically you want to have this diverse party. One person's a wizard with high intelligence, so they can make these checks. One person has high dexterity, so they can steal stuff and sleight of hand and stealth. One person has high charisma that's going to be doing the talking, so they can intimidate and persuade. And then you can have a fourth person with the mix. But having someone with high wisdom, with those couple, are really important and will make a big difference in overall exploration and finding secrets throughout that game. I have on my website, Deltiasgaming.com, the top 10 builds that I use in the game. If I were you, I would pick something like the Fighter your very first time because it's so simple. Once you become more familiar with the game and mechanics, I recommend the Paladin because you have charisma built in and you're able to talk as the main character and get a bunch of bonuses. If you're going to play on super hard or difficulty, I would go with the Ranger and a Gloomstalker. And if you just like nuking things with huge fireballs without a lot of consequences, go with the Sorcerer. Sorcerer, unlike a wizard, uses charisma for its damage, so you're able to talk and do good damage with the Sorcerer. Okay, now we're going to talk about subclasses really quick. So every class has a variety of different subclasses. Some have a little bit more, some have a little bit less. You either get your subclass at level 1, 2, or 3. Most commonly, it's level 1 or 3. So subclasses are going to add individual things to your character and or build. So on spellcasters, what you get is always prepared spells. Meaning on your spell book, they're going to be prepared so you can use them whenever you want versus slotting them when you have a limited amount of slots in your spell book. And you can mouse over the individual subclass feature and it will tell you. Various different levels throughout the leveling experience, you're going to get subclass bonuses. The thing you need to understand is this is not a permanent choice. So some, yes, are stronger and weaker than others, but if you screwed up and made a decision on this, you can always respec with withers and NPC very early in the game. You haven't got your subclass like you're playing a monk and you're like, when am I going to get my subclass? It will come at level 3 at least. All right, now we're going to go over the core mechanics of Baldur's Gate 3, and it is a bit different if you're unfamiliar with the game. It's going to use a top-down, turn-based style of combat. So it's going to be all about planning and strategically placing yourself in the right position and pre-buffing. And each turn, you're going to manage a bunch of different little actions. So you have 3 components. You have actions. These are your primary moves. They're going to be like attacking with a weapon, casting a spell, or using a special ability. They're going to have a green little icon on them. And you're going to have bonus actions, which are smaller secondary moves, such as shoving someone, drinking a potion, using a consumable. And also some classes can use powerful abilities using a bonus action. Movement, you're going to be able to move a specific distance based on the individual race and or character speed. So the basic premise here is that you want to typically use an action and a bonus action each turn if you can. You also want to position yourself on higher ground for increased damage and or accuracy. And you'll have little AoE circles that you can put on the ground for like AoE spells and so forth. There's also something called reactions. So this is going to be triggered a specific response. Like let's say you're around a specific enemy and then you try to move away from them, they can react and hit you. There's a reaction tab in your individual menu that will pop this up. So if I go into my individual paladin, this is an Act 1 paladin, and I hit this key, it'll have reactions. It'll have common. So these are like spells and other things that you can use, and then it has paladin-specific actions that I can take. Reactions are very important. You can put this little check mark on Ask, otherwise it will automatically fire or not use the individual ability. So if you want the game to ask you before you automatically do it, click check. Why that's important is specifically Divine Smite, if I hit it and land, it will consume a spell slot. I may want to use the spell slot for something else. Unlike other games, Baldur's Gate 3, you get a certain amount of spells at different levels, so you can only replenish once per long rest. So you don't want to fire off a spell every single turn in combat if you can, because you might need a bigger, more powerful one later. You can also enter turn-based mode and experiment with this just by going in the bottom right and clicking. Then it'll come up with an attack order on the top left. When you have individual enemies with it, it will be based on your initiative, which is a dexterity score. So typically higher dexterity-based characters, rogues, rangers, and so on, will go first in the turn order. That's really powerful, and that's why I love the ranger and the gloomstalker, is you can go first and nuke a couple enemies before they even get a chance to hit you. You'll also be able to click your individual action, and it'll come up with 1,000 little icons of all the things that you can use. This will include like your main hand attack, it will include bow, it will include spells, a bunch of summons, and then also consumables. You can chuck spores, you can use scrolls, tons of different options. So if you ever get what is a bonus action or what's an action, click the individual icon. If you have a complex class like the Paladin, your individual class resource will be left to right. So Lay on Hands is an individual Paladin thing. I can click it, it drops down with another menu, I click it, and then I go towards the individual player, and that's it. It'll also show how far you can move, and then red when you can't get any further. And you can see from the bottom here, these are all my reactions that are queued up and will trigger automatically, or will have a pop-up that asks me. So there's a lot going on here initially. The biggest thing is movement when you very first start out. So you have the jump, which will consume a bonus action and allow you to get up higher. Getting up higher is very helpful. If you're not able to engage or you just need to survive, you can consume an action and use dash. Some classes can have bonus actions. If you're near an individual enemy and you want to move away without triggering a provoke attack, you can hit disengage. Help, this is if someone's down, basically dead, they're about to die, and they're out of HP. You can actually go get them, pop them up at 1 HP. It's confusing when someone gets down, you have no idea how to resurrect them. It's help. And you can use a resurrection scroll if they actually die and fail a death saving throw. Hide is really helpful, but it costs an action. So usually this is used by rogues and rangers that use bonus actions. And then you have throws. You can actually chuck a bunch of stuff in your inventory. Some for instances where this is good, you have like this thing that will light everything on fire. You can actually throw water down on the ground and then light it with a lightning. You can do all sorts of things. So don't think that just by doing actions is the only thing you can use with main hand attacks. You can throw a haste spore down and get everyone haste, which is 2 actions per turn for 3 turns. That's a huge thing with just 1 action. So another helpful hint is when you're going around and exploring and you think you're about to enter a fight, one thing you want to do is get everyone into stealth. And I hit Shift and C on PC and it gets everyone into stealth, and you can see the icons up here. And then you want to get in turn-based mode and you can do a surprise attack. So that will give you basically a free round of combat if you surprise the enemy first. So if you know a battle is about to come up by looking in your map and seeing some red icons, get in stealth, try to trigger the initial round of combat via a range caster or someone like a rogue using a bow. That will give you a huge advantage in combat, getting 1 free turn of damage. Now you're going to do a lot of talking, a lot of dialogue in the game, and there's going to be little pop-ups that say individual skills like persuasion, intimidation. This is going to be determined on which individual character talks, not what's in your party. So you want typically a high charisma-based character with intimidation, persuasion, or performance to do mainly the talking. The reason why is they can manipulate and change the conversation typically easier than someone with high dexterity or something like that. You're going to be doing a lot of dice rolls on conversations that will factor in skills. Something that's very helpful is having a cleric with the guidance skill. This will give you a plus 1d4 for ability checks. The NPC will cast this automatically just by clicking the button when it's going for a dice roll specifically. So you want to add all those individual factors that you possibly can to increase your likelihood of passing this. Some people will do what's called save summing, which is saving right before a dice roll and then loading 1,000 times until they get the individual one. You can do that if you want, you cheatskates, but you can't on honor mode. So you're going to have to learn these mechanics and talk with the right person in the appropriate time. So look for those pop-ups, use a charisma-based character, and realize that it's based on your ability scores and your skills that you set up in character creation. You can get more skill and you can get more ability score just by playing the game, leveling up, and getting equipment and gear. Speaking of equipment and gear, let's just talk about that real quick. So you can see this guy's inventory. I have a gazillion different things on here. You can mouse over the individual things, and I got a permanent bonus, so it's at 17. The reason why is, well, I got a permanent bonus in Act 1. The biggest thing is finding different things in Act 1 that complement your build. I have something on my website, Deltiasgaming.com. You can come over here, and what I like to do is sort by type. Kind of cleans up your inventory. You're going to have a gazillion pieces of inventory and all these little fancy things right here. You can get different little bags and backpacks and stuff them all in. What I'd highly recommend is stuff and organize it way better than me by putting these orange quest items into one bag, never getting rid of them, and then that way you can always come back and know exactly which character. You can also slot it on the individual bar here. So players that are much more organized than me will have a bunch of different things here, like all their alchemy, all of their miscellaneous consumables that they can use, all of their quest items. They can come down here and click. And this can actually be gear items as well. So let's say you have a couple of different sets that you want to wear depending on the situation, the combat encounter. Bang, you can come down here, click that. And this bar is not limited just to actions and bonus actions. So you're going to have these individual pieces of gear. These 3 here are just for cosmetics when you go back to your camp. You're going to have a cape. You don't get a whole lot of options for cloaks and capes at the start of the game. And then you'll have something right here you can use as a torch, a musical instrument, a melee, and a ranged weapon. Something that you can do is on characters that you don't plan on using ranged weapons at all, you can still stick a ranged weapon on them just to get bonuses. There's a dark fire short bow that comes in Act 2 that gives fire and cold resistance, and you can throw that on a spellcaster and just never use it just to get the bonuses. There's also things that give +1 or +3 initiative, so you go faster. So if you have a slow character that doesn't use a range build, put a ranged weapon on. You don't have to use it. You'll also have tons of scrolls. These are helpful one-time use consumables for individual spells that you can use. Always keep these with you. If you run out of spell slots or your character doesn't have any ranged abilities, you can use scrolls. So I would recommend keeping them on and not selling these puppies. They're very helpful. Another thing about inventory is good old inventory management. So you'll see weight you can carry. So if we go back to our camp here, your camp is going to have individual storage. And if I hold the Alt key, it shows me all the interactable items that I have. I started this game, I think, with 4 real players, so that we have these 4 traveler's chests. Now you can actually physically go over there, or you can click this bottom left thing and it'll show camp inventory. So it'll show all of these and then shows the individual companions and what they have in their inventory as well. So typically you go out, you do a bunch of quests, and the reason you come back to your camp is 1, to interact with companions and talk and dialogue, but it's to long rest. So the resting mechanic allows you to get back spells and abilities. So you come here, end the day, it'll give you this pop-up, and depending on the difficulty that you're playing, will depend on the camp resources. So these supply camps are very valuable because you'll get back all of your resources. Typically, individual stories will happen during this port where you trip over into the night. You'll be visited by something or something will happen. So be aware that resting really progresses the story. If you're hung up and you don't know what to do next, sometimes it's just best to come back and long rest to see if you get one of these story elements. Now, a trick that you can use for encumbrance is this camp feature. So you're going to be looting a bunch of stuff, and you can drop all of your materials in your individual traveler's chest. So a bunch of different weapons, jewelry. I mean, just loot everything if you can. Hold that Alt down and just loot it all. Then when you're ready, you basically stand right next to this chest, and in the world map, you're by a vendor, and then you hit leave camp. So even though you're encumbered and have like 2,000 pounds on you, you can click this guy and then sell it all. And then you have a bunch of different options here. You have trade or barter. Barter is kind of like a mini game. I don't necessarily do that. I typically just do trade and not try to haggle with them. You can also mark individual items to mass sell. So you'll see sell wares. And in your inventory, let's say there's something you don't want to use. You can just right click it, add to wares. You can also hold shift and do a bunch of them. Obviously not these mission items, but you get the idea. So if you want to do some mass selling, that's a way to do it. Store it in your storage chest, park right next to a vendor, drop it, and then boom, at unloading, sell tons of stuff. While we're on the vendors, something that you want to focus on is getting arrows. These are extremely powerful. So what they do is they shoot and do your normal attack damage, but also they will add effects. So like this one is fire, this one is ice. Ice can actually knock them down and stun them. So it's a way your rogue, ranger, or whoever fighter can use a range stun possibly. So get creative with them. Also potions and consumables. Something like this is extremely valuable early on, Elixir of Bloodlust. When you take it until a long rest, so as long as you go until a long rest, you're going to get additional action once you kill something and 5 hit points. These are available in Act 1 and throughout the game. Same with Potion of Speed. So what I spend my gold on in Act 1 is there are some powerful items for sure. A lot of them you can collect, but I dump a lot of the normal items and I buy these consumables. Potion of Speed, Elixir of Bloodlust. I buy the arrows because they have such a huge impact in combat. One that people sleep on is this Oil of Accuracy. So whatever weapon that you have out, if you coat your weapon, it gets a +2 bonus to attack roll. That attack roll will make your attack land easier. So it'll have a higher percentage of landing, I should say. So something like that, you can pre-buff. And that's yet another tip before in combat and core mechanics. When people ask me how to get good at the game, I would say, well, you play a lot, but also you want to pre-buff. So let's say there's a fight going on down here. When I say pre-buff, what I typically do is I go into turn-based mode. And then I go through a series of buffing. So let's say I get Shadowheart here. Okay, so I'm going to go into combat. Well, what do I need? I'm going to cast Blessed. It's going to require concentration, which means another spell that requires concentration can't be held at the same time, and then NPCs can interrupt me. But it's going to give me 10 turns. So why not just cast this, and we'll make each character's attacks and defenses a little bit more likely. So I got concentration rolling on that one. This doesn't even require concentration, so I can cast this. Okay, good so far. Now I got this guy. I can use a bonus action to do my Oil of Accuracy, and you can see it on the individual weapon. And you can also do a pre-buff with something else if you wanted to, but I don't have anything on him. I got my little Scratch, my little familiar. I'm going to summon him. Okay, we're ready to go. On him, he doesn't really buff much, so I'm going to let him go, and we're going to hit end turn. We can also do another consumable with her, so we'll do Elixir of Bloodlust and turn. Now, my turn will refresh after I end this. I'm just going to go to environment, and I'll still be in turn-based mode. So now I can enter the combat with 9 turns of Blessed, all my consumables, poisons, potions, whatever rolling, and if I know combat's coming, when we start combat, I'm not going to have to use an action, a bonus action for all those important buffs, and we can start off much, much stronger. So keep in mind, it's very important to do that. Next up is exploration and just the world environment. There's a lot of interactables. So I talked about this earlier, but hold down the Alt key, or if you're on consoles, there'll be a highlight thing. This will allow you to see individual items that you can click and pick up. And when I'm playing, I use my mouse a lot of times to mouse over various objects and things that may not be shown with the Alt, because there is tons and tons of stuff to loot and pick up. Barrels, crates, chests are obvious, but anything you can pick up and loot and sell later, you're going to be starved of gold early on, and it's very important to take your time and loot everything and sell it if possible. Now, while you're exploring, remember those skill proficiencies and your ability scores will determine various different pop-ups. Like perception is very common. You'll be walking, it'll say perception check. You're just going to be going through these individual dice checks in the background to see if you pass and detect these individual things. That's why having that diverse group, one with intelligence like a wizard, one with charisma like a paladin, one with wisdom like a cleric, one with dexterity like a rogue or a ranger. This will make sure that you have the ability to detect almost everything in your environment as you go on and explore. Now, when you look at the individual map, you can see some details. You have little waypoints or way shrines, whatever. You'll have individual vendors that pop up. And the maps are pretty self-explanatory. You go on the right-hand side, and you can click travel to all these different things. Some of them take a little bit longer to load than others. This is an Act 1 save that I have. And then also, if you freak out and forget how to get to the camp, you can click it from your individual map here. The map will actually have XY coordinates, so individual guides that I do on my site, Deltiasgaming.com, have I said that enough? Will have coordinates where objects and items are. So if you're confused on the individual map, you can come up here and look. If you're playing with friends, you can hit this ping button. It'll ping the map to where to go. Multiplayer players can go just wherever they want and can kind of circle back on individual quests in combat. So sometimes you might be spread across the map looking where to go, and you can ping individual players that way. Your individual quest marker will have something, and you can click on it, and sometimes it will say it will take you to the individual quest and item. This Daughter of Darkness is Shadowheart quest, so it's a bit tricky. You can hit show on map like this one, and it will pop up the actual individual map location. So that can be helpful if you're not knowing where to go and what to do. Another helpful thing for exploration is there's going to be traps and all sorts of stuff that you're going to hamper you in your experience. Cast Mage Hand. So Mage Hand will let you kind of operate this low HP like NPC for a few turns, and you can manipulate objects with this. So if you want to experiment on opening a chest or you can't reach a specific point, you can use this and even hit fly to get further places. So Mage Hand, I think, is a cantrip that you can use every short rest on some characters or all the time, and it'll allow you to basically explore things safely. And also, if you don't know what's going to be in that cave or that specific spot, stay back in stealth, use Mage Hand, and let that thing go find it out for you. This will be very helpful during puzzles and other mechanics you're unfamiliar with. Another thing you can do while you're exploring is hit this over-the-top view. So sometimes the map won't let you like scroll out and like get on top of a ledge or something, but you can hit that combat view, which will go over the top. That can help you kind of find individual items or enemies while you're in combat the normal view would not give you. Okay, next up, let's talk about our individual party. So if you hit this button up here, party view, it will give you a wide view of your individual characters and so forth. What I'd recommend is priority number 1 in Act 1 is recruit all the companions. The reason why is their quests are awesome. Even if you don't like the individual companions, they're amazing. They lead to achievements and gear, and sometimes powerful bonuses. So even if you don't like them, it's worth recruiting them, keeping them in your party, or even in your camp, and then progressing their individual stories to see what happens. I've talked about this at length. Having a well-rounded party with wisdom, intelligence, and dexterity is the best, especially with the charisma-based character to the talking. So companions you're going to be able to control. just like you would your normal character. You can also respec them as well. So let's say you don't like their individual class or their build. You can get Withers unlocked in Act 1 very early and come over here to him, and you can help change his class. You're not going to be able to change your race though. So that's the real critical thing that I've been trying to say, is your race is very important depending on what mid-max class you want to be. Now, individual companions have a lot going on for them. We'll have individual character sheets. And then if you come over here, it'll show their proficiency bonuses. So we have Shadowheart with Insight and Medicine. I should have done Perception. That's a me problem. But you can see a lot more details about them. You can also see their race, their background, and their deity, specifically for a cleric. Now you're going to get inspiration and various different bonuses for actions that you take. You can spend these on ability checks. So it's based on completing background goals. So depending on your background and the character choices, you'll be able to earn these inspirations, including some for your companions. You want to use these typically on really hardcore, or you gotta pass these ability check things. Not so important when you're doing save scumming, but some that you can't skip in honor mode, this is where you're gonna spend the inspiration. Just realize that companions and characters are going to reward you or neglect you and leave you possibly based on your actions. So companions can and will leave you if you make big choices they do not like. Now let's move into some overall priorities I would give you as a beginner when you very first start Act 1. Very first thing you're going to do is complete the prologue. When you complete the prologue, take your time, loot everything, get familiar with the game, get all the loot that you can, because it will make a big difference once you reach the very first city and can sell tons of stuff. Next, you're going to get on the beach, and the number one priority is to recruit your companions, as many as you can, and loot everything, barrels, crates, because you're going to need a lot of supplies to do long rest. And your spellcasters that you're going to unlock early are going to be super dependent on casting spells with little weak cantrips, so you're going to need a long rest frequently to progress the story as you recruit more companions and also replenish those spells. Next, after you get the companions, you're going to get Withers unlocked. Withers is going to be found near the beach where you first go, the Overgrown Ruins, just a little bit north. There's a slight little combat scenario and puzzle in here. I would highly recommend doing that to unlock it. Then you can respec your companion. So Shadowheart comes out with a goofy subclass. I always respec her to life because she's going to be my pocket healer. And if I want Lae'zel as a ranger, I'll respec her and so on. I think it costs 100 gold at the start. So once you get that done, the next thing is to move up to the Emerald Grove and do a bunch of quests. So what I would recommend doing is when you get to the Emerald Grove, talk to literally everyone, whether they have like a quest marker on them or not. See what transpires and unfolds, and then start doing those quests. You'll be able to sell a bunch of gear at this time and upgrade some gear as well if you have gold to spare. Your overall goal on Act 1 is to get to level 5 as fast as possible. That's a huge spike in your power. Level 4, everyone's going to be able to get a feat, which will give you like either a +2 ability score or some cool little passive. But when you get 5, you usually get massive new awesome spells like Fireball, or you get extra attack for those melee damage dealers. And once you hit 5, then you can go back and do some of the harder fights. So if it's challenging at the first beginning, it really is. Wait till you get level 5, it should be a lot easier. So you got your companions respect. There's another bonus that you can get called the Necromancy of Thay. It's super important in Act 3. It's going to be in the Blighted Village down here a little bit. So make sure you spend your time exploring and getting that unlocked. A lot of these things that you do in Act 1 show up in Act 3 and they're super impactful. There's going to be a couple summons called Scratch and Shovel. Those are 2 that you can unlock, and Scratch can be summoned at all times. He's your dog. Shovel can only be summoned by a wizard that can learn this individual spell in roughly the same area that Necromancy of Thay is. So you're going to spend some time unlocking all this stuff up here, doing the quest, reaching level 5. Once you hit level 5, that's when you can go to the Underdark and the Grimforge. The Underdark and or the Grimforge unlocks even more areas in Act 1, quests and vendors to play with. Arcane Tower is very important, and you can enter the Grimforge this way. The Grimforge has, well, a forge that you can use to craft the best armor in Act 1. Adamantium armor and or a shield or weapons. You can only craft 2, but these weapons and armor are so powerful they'll last you to Act 3. So most of the time people are progressing, they'll reach about level 7, then they'll go to the Underdark Grimforge, find the 2 bits of Mithril, craft this gear so they can have their main character, maybe a companion like Shadowheart with like the best shield in Act 1, all the way to Act 3. Also, there's a bunch of permanent bonuses. So quest indoor actions that you can take to give you bonuses like Auntie Ethel. She's a bit more complex, but if you go through her quest in Act 1 and do this thing, you can get a +1 bonus permanently to your character. Act 3 also has a +2 bonus permanently to your character. And if you're a strength build, Act 2 has a +2 bonus. So that's the reason why you would go on an odd number and ability score only if you intend to do this and you're familiar with it. And that's how you get super high strength and or ability score and do crazy damage. So check the website for permanent bonuses. It makes a huge difference before you turn over to Act 2. Okay, some general tips for you. Save scumming. Yes, I would probably do it when you're very first starting. So before a pivotal choice, before a pivotal encounter, hit save. Baldur's Gate 3, you can actually change the amount of saves that you have on your individual game. So it's a maximum number of quick saves, maximum number of auto saves. I have it down. But what you can do is before individual important parts, you can hit save. So you have an Act 1 save, an Act 2, and Act 3. And then individual ones, you maybe want to see what happens when you change a decision. Because you can always come back. So make sure to save scum. Number 2 is respec. So if you're not feeling a specific build, go to Withers and respec with them. Like let's say something's too complicated. Just pick a fighter, a 2-handed weapon, and just boot people with action search. Don't be afraid to respec you or your companions if it's just not a good choice. Number 3 is use the environment in combat. So this means not only stealthing, the tip I showed earlier, getting behind trees and so on, but you can shoot barrels, you can shoot crates, you can shoot chandeliers, anything in the environment that can be interacted with, you can manipulate, throw, chuck, shoot, blow up, or bring your own fire to the party. And positioning is really important. So before starting to fight, ask yourself, how can I get the high ground? Think Obi-Wan Kenobi here. Also, you're going to want to take advantage of resting. So what I do typically is before a big encounter where I know there's going to be a climactic boss battle, I will do a long rest, and then I will use elixirs, like Elixir of Bloodlust to give me another action after I kill something, or I'll use Elixir of Hill Giant Strength to give me more strength. I'll use a Resistance one if this boss is specific to elements. I would use this Advantage one on Concentration for something like Shadowheart if she's holding Bless, and I would have every character having an Elixir running. Then I would coat my weapons right before I went in, and then I would use Bless or some other spell from Stealth in turn-based mode right before I went in. Also, when it comes to NPCs, talk to everyone. There's not always going to be something above their head that says, hey, come talk to me, stupid. I have something really important to say. So take the time to investigate in NPCs and their stories. Some of the best quests, side quests, and narratives are the ones that off the beaten path that you have to explore and start. Well, gang, that's a video. I hope you got something out of this. There's a lot coming to Baldur's Gate 3. It's complicated, and if you're jumping back in or starting for the first time, you're going to be overwhelmed like I was. It took me like 100 hours to kind of know what was going on in the game. So hopefully you got something out of this. If you did, hit that thumbs up, subscribe for more, and I appreciate you watching.